From witnessing the aftermath of abuse firsthand to confronting the grim reality of euthanasia, these shelter workers share their most traumatic experiences. Their stories shed light on the dark side of animal cruelty and neglect, leaving readers both horrified and deeply moved. Number 10. A gruesome discovery at a boarding kennel. A woman who worked at an animal boarding facility in Texas was shocked to find a tiny kitten hiding in a bag. Upon closer inspection, she discovered that the kitten had been brutally decapitated. The staff were horrified as they had no knowledge of such an incident and couldn't understand why someone would harm such a young and innocent creature. The police were immediately notified and an investigation was launched. But no arrests have been made, and the motive behind the kitten's murder remains unclear. This case has sparked outrage among animal rights activists who are demanding justice for the kitten and calling for stricter laws to protect animals from such horrific abuse. No. 9. An unyielding mother dog. A pregnant dog was brought to an Ohio animal shelter after being found wandering along a road. Despite the efforts of shelter workers to care for her, the dog remained unresponsive and didn't give birth for several days. When she finally did, it became clear that the puppies weren't viable, and the mother dog refused to let them go, even after they stopped moving. It took multiple attempts and the use of a bottle to persuade the dog to let the stillborn puppies go. Eventually, all 12 puppies were removed, and the dog, believed to be a pit bull terrier mix, was placed up for adoption. However, she was so traumatized by the ordeal that she bit a female caretaker on the hand and has yet to be adopted. Number 8. A devastating diagnosis. A dog was brought to an Ohio animal shelter after being found emaciated and unable to move its back legs. Despite the severity of its condition, a vet managed to stabilize the dog and determined that it had suffered a spinal injury. With the dog paralyzed from the waist down, it required extensive rehabilitation to regain some of its mobility. After a month of physical therapy, the dog was able to take a few steps and was even fitted with a wheelchair. However, it soon became apparent that the dog's quality of life was poor, and it was euthanized at the age of 6. No. 7. A haunting farewell. A man working at an animal shelter in North Carolina had an eerie experience when he heard the voice of a little girl while walking through a hallway. Assuming it was a recording, he continued on until he reached a room full of cats and dogs awaiting euthanasia. As he opened the door, the girl's voice stopped, and he realized that there was no one else in the room. He went on to work in the room and eventually left, only to hear the girl's voice again as he walked away. While some believe the voice may have belonged to a ghost, others suggest it was a trick of the auditory system known as the voice of Paul. No. 6. A heartbreaking rescue. A woman volunteering at an animal shelter in Florida was deeply affected by the sight of a malnourished puppy brought in by animal control officers. The puppy's ribs and spine were visible through its thin coat, and it was clear that it had unreceived proper nourishment. Despite the puppy's desperate condition, the woman was hopeful that with some TLC, it would make a full recovery. She began bottle feeding the puppy every 2 hours, and soon noticed a change in its demeanor. The puppy became more alert and began wagging its tail, indicating that it was feeling better. However, the woman's joy was short-lived, as she soon contracted an infection and had to stop caring for the puppy. Despite the setback, the puppy was eventually adopted by a loving family and is now thriving. No. 5. A grueling hunt. 2 men entered a residence during an animal cruelty investigation and were shocked to find an emaciated dog chained in the backyard. The dog's ribs and spine were visible, and it had been left without food or water. After alerting other officers to the situation, the men attempted to coax the dog with food, but it was too weak to stand and collapsed. Despite their best efforts to save the dog, it died shortly thereafter. The men were visibly shaken by the ordeal, and the grim discovery left them questioning the extent of human cruelty. Number 4. A difficult decision. A woman working at an animal shelter in Indiana was faced with a heartbreaking decision when she found a dog that had been tied up and left to die. Despite the dog's injuries and malnourished state, she refused to euthanize it. Instead, she provided the dog with food, water, and medication, and nursed it back to health over the course of 2 weeks. However, when it came time to find the dog a new home, she was unable to part ways with it and adopted it herself. No. 3. A life-saving act. A woman working at an animal shelter in Texas witnessed the horrifying condition of a chihuahua that had been left to die in a hot car. The dog's body was covered in feces and urine, and it was barely clinging to life. Without hesitation, the woman rushed to the dog's aid, carrying it inside the shelter and providing it with much-needed water and shade. Thanks to her quick reaction, the dog survived and was eventually adopted by a loving family. No, 2. A tragic discovery. A woman working at an animal shelter in Colorado was deeply disturbed when she found a cat that had been decapitated. The cat's head was found near its body, and it was clear that it had been deliberately killed. The woman was horrified by the level of violence and cruelty involved in the crime and called for an investigation. However, despite the efforts of animal control officers, no suspects have been identified, and the motive behind the killing remains unknown. No. 1. A stolen companion. A man who worked at an animal shelter in Utah was devastated when a dog that he had rescued was stolen. The dog had been at the shelter for several months, and the man had formed a strong bond with it. However, when he arrived to work one day, he found that the dog had been taken and a note left behind indicating that it had been adopted. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to locate the dog and was heartbroken by its disappearance. These real-life horror stories from animal shelters reveal the dark side of animal abuse and neglect. From decapitated kittens to stolen dogs, these stories are sure to leave readers shocked and saddened. However, they also highlight the bravery and compassion of animal shelter workers, who go above and beyond to help animals in need. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share to support our work. And don't forget to subscribe for more updates.